Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I'm here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, this week I'm wondering why we do what we do. Why is I'm sort of crashing out existential crises all above? Obviously, since the last time we spoke, we've not only lost on penalties in the Carabao Cup to Brentford, that's two losses to Brentford in the opening month, but we have also lost to draw. Sorry, I say lost. It feels like a loss. It really does feel like a loss.
Yeah.
We've drawn 1-1 on the road against Sunderland at the Stadium of Light. I just don't. I don't really know what to say here. I want to. We like to be positive, and I think the only sort of positive anecdote I can think of today is, as I was driving, I was thinking I've not done Sunderland away. I've been to the stadium, so I was thinking, it's nice to tick off a new. Like I've been, but like it doesn't count if you've not seen a game there, right? And I was like, when did I get to Sunderland? And I believe you did this as well, Dan. We did the play on the pitch work that you,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? Yeah. And I can't remember if I don't think you and Elliot did the whole thing, but you were definitely there at the start. And I ended up playing in one of them games at Sunderland for a team that was like a man down, and I scored an absolute worldie. So I was buzzing because I'm like, oh, I'm returning back to my sort of
Yeah.
my glory days. Maybe you and I will sub me
League.
on. Exactly, yeah. I was wearing a pair of Puma suede trainers, and I managed to stick it in the top bins at the Stadium of Light. But I mean, I'm not the only one that can score screamers at the Stadium of Light. To be fair,
Really
obviously,
not.
apparently,
Really not.
Matty Cash got there in the end, mate. But you know, it's a shame that like that goal doesn't really matter within the context of the result and the past four results in the league. Really,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, mate. A difficult one to stomach. A difficult one to stomach. It did feel like, look, um, I don't want to jump ahead because there's so much that kind of came before it. From the moment the lineup came out, I mean, I feel like we talk about this every week, but the lineup was just like a big, uh, like,
yeah.
really? We doing this again. Again, I hate just the weather is so symptomatic of kind of where we're at the club right now. But I thought I would completely fast forward through the game, mate, and allow the post match comments from Unai to kind of maybe kick off our conversation because
Yeah.
we are very much at the manager digging out the players stage of a club sliding into a crisis. Because we got some post-match quotes from Unai today that I don't think we've ever really had like this in his Villa tenure. The only time I can like remember him this seething with the team, like obviously there's like Old Trafford at the back end of last season, like that was a really pissed off Unai Emery. But I'm talking specifically with the players. The only game that came to mind was Stevenage. It was like his second or third game, remember in the cup.
Yeah.
They came to Villa Park and beat us. That's the only time I remember him like this irate with the players. And his quotes were, "We are not playing like I want. We have to adapt to new players, and we will need time with them. Others know we want to control the game with the ball. Their chances started with their goalkeeper, long balls and second actions in our box. Like that, we are conceding chances. We had one player more. We didn't control the game, doing passes and passes and passes. We did not take the right moment to attack them. We have to recover our identity. I am not frustrated with the result, but more with how we are playing. We are not comfortable with our style. We have to try to recover our personality and confidence to play like we are training." And then comes the damning soundbite. We were lazy sometimes. Lazy. The goal we conceded, we were lazy. Perhaps that's because we didn't play in our style. Um, it's pretty unlike Unai Emery, who is normally like die on a hill for his players type thing. There's been so many times you think of those kind of like almost memed reactions when like he tries to almost completely deflect like the
Marco
conversation
Bizo.
away.
Marco
Marco
Bizo.
Bizo, when we he remember that one time he just was like Europe,
Yeah.
Europe,
Yeah.
yeah, like he kind of goes with these like really like unique goes to such lengths to deflect conversations away from uncomfortable themes where it like falls on the players, where there's blame attributed to a player or focus on a particular player. So for him to kind of go away from something that is clearly really his managerial style to go straight in with such strong words, and like it's I don't think he said anything crazy. In fact, I agree with a lot of what he was saying. The only part I kind of disagree with is that like we need more time. Like we want to do better at controlling games. Like we had 76% possession or whatever it was today. But I mean, those kind of quotes I really do think are pretty. I feel like we've missed kind of a few steps there in the Unai Emery descent into madness. Like to go from where we were, as you say, with the whole Marco Bizzo thing a couple of weeks ago, like to this where we're like, yeah, these players, they were lazy. Feels like a pretty big jump. And from him, he walked down the tunnel with like 10 seconds to go or something like that, shook hands and went straight down the tunnel. And I think from that moment on, it was like, okay, we're about to get something pretty explosive from Unai. And he's certainly delivered that. And, I think it was a pretty good lens to maybe go back and review the match through, mate, because I don't think I've ever seen a gaffer like this.
No, it is worrying. As you say, it does feel like we've skipped a few steps here. One of I mean, all of those quotes ring alarm bells, but the one thing that sort of really stuck out to me was Unai saying that Harvey Elliott was playing the ball too quickly. I feel like we've hopped on this podcast every week now for the past 5-6 weeks. To be fair, we could probably even go back as far as 6 months and say the ball hasn't moved quick enough. So when the gaffer's coming out and saying things like that about your new signing, who, understandably wants to get us back on the front foot, and that's really, really confusing to me. We can control games all we like, but if you're not creating chances and if you're not scoring from the few chances that you are creating, then like, what are you doing? And, I think there was definitely that sense of urgency when Elliot came on, because like, look, we're trying to win a game here. We're trying to see a game out. Our first win of the season, we've gone 5 games in the Premier League without scoring a goal. And look, I really don't, I like Cash's goal. Great. I think we've been screaming for that type of intuition just to shoot, right? Somebody please shoot. Somebody has to do it, right? And should the Sunderland goalkeeper do better? Absolutely. But Kashi obviously scored a couple in the international break, and understandably so, got a bit of stick from Villa fans saying, well, why can't you do that for us? And here he is doing it for us. But when, like, if you look at the stats, mate, like throughout this game, we've had 12 shots. How many of these were like 3 players surrounding, getting blocks in? Like, how many of these were like clear-cut chances? Well, I can tell you actually, because on SofaScore it's saying we had 2 big chances, and I would hazard a guess that Cash's goal was not one of them, because he was 35 yards out and he rifled it straight at the goalkeeper. So you can't really quantify that as a big chance. Those 2 big chances will be those 2 headers in the dying seconds. The one that both Kashi and Ollie missed, and then the one that Ollie headed straight at Roofs and right at the end of the game, which, oh my God, you have to do better. It's just not good enough, mate. It just isn't good enough. And, again, like, you guys know this by now. You guys have been with us for a long enough time. We're glass half full people, and I've kind of been hesitant to, sound the alarm, as per se, at the panic stations, because I think in isolation, each game, I think we've generally controlled most of the games. And I think, Brentford is like an unlucky one. Palace, like, yeah, we have to do better there. But like, if we're being totally honest with ourselves, do we expect Aston Villa fully firing to go and beat an Oliver Glasner Crystal Palace side? No, because Unai Emery hasn't. But when you start to then, look at the broader picture, and that's now 6 games since the season started without a win, and we go into Europe on Thursday. Mate, what were we saying last week about this run of 3 games, how important this is. Sunderland, Bologna, Fulham. This feels season defining. And again, just to reiterate for those who may be the minority, but I feel like this is honestly just the way the majority of the fan base is feeling. People are worried. People are worried. And I don't, we don't scaremonger here. That's not what we do at all. We are always optimistic. And I'm sure we still can turn this around, but we're kind of this. Where does the line in the sand come, mate? Where does the line in the sand come?
I think the one thing that like concerns me most is, and this is why I started with those comments from Unai, because once you cross that Rubicon, once you start, like if I'm, as you say, I don't want to scaremonger, but if I'm Harvey Elliott, I'm looking at those, and it's like you're singling out me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, do you know, like, he is the least of our problems right now. And look, like, he also, there's, he brought up Ollie. He said Watkins is not having the chances to score. He had one in the last minute. If he scores, maybe that's what changes everything. He actually made the point to go at the end, kind of after. I don't know if there was a moment of regret, maybe, in kind of mentioning the Harvey Elliott kind of comments, because he kind of came when the reporter asked him specifically to go into the whole laziness thesis. He said, lazy. Sometimes we are lazy when we're playing here away. We have to fight the duels, and we were not fighting all the duels. I watched the goal we conceded, and we were lazy. We were lazy. But all the team, not just the centre-backs or Cash, we are lazy. Usually the players have the right attitude, but sometimes maybe they are a bit upset or not feeling good. They are not fighting. It is not something I can tell them like a punishment. Collectively, we have to try and understand and feel better. So there was a kind of, at the end of his interview, there was an effort to kind of bring it back to the collective. But I mean, generally, like players nowadays, like managers just don't do that. And normally when you see a manager start to do that, it's really difficult to turn that back. If you're watching a manager that's under pressure, and all managers seem to do it in that kind of, let's talk about it, like that cycle where they're on the road to being sacked or whatever it is. And I'm not saying that Unai's on that, but like normally when a manager and they have a pretty damning result, and that you see him in the post match being like, yeah, the players need to do this, blah blah blah. You look at what is happening up in Glasgow with Russell Martin, right? Like this whole situation is because of like the blame that he keeps putting on the players, and like refusing to take any, like, I'm not saying that it's quite that extreme, but like normally when managers start to do that, you cross a line that is very, very difficult to get back on side on. Look, Unai can do it. I said on the last pod, he's got a huge amount of credit in the bank. I don't think anyone's going to start calling for his head yet. There are players in this club, I would rather lose 99% of the playing squad before I lost to Unai Emery. But like this is what worries me, and the kind of the attitude of the team today was just really, really poor. And I think the kind of the goal we score through Cash is one where it doesn't really fill you with, like, it's a goal, right? So you've got to take it because those have been so few and far between. But it's not a goal that we carved out.
It's a moment. It's just it's in isolation.
Top luck, and
the goal stands by itself.
As you rightly said, mate, it shouldn't have happened anyway, because like it should have been saved. But it's a goal, right? And you kind of like, the only thing that makes that goal okay with being the only goal we scored that game is if we hold on and take the win, because it's like, you know what, it got us over the line. And I was kind of like, when that goal went in, I was like, right, if we just hold on here, maybe it's the break we need. We just need to get away with a goal, a win, a difficult ground, and just get out. And I think that's a platform to build on. But you undo all of that with the goal they go and concede. It's so poor. There's no challenge at all on Xhaka in the air. Then the kind of back line is all over the place. And it keeps Isidore on side, and he has the easy task of just tucking it away. And it just like screams of a team that just like isn't focusing, is distracted. And I don't know what, like, that I can look at the set of JJ and I can be like, I understand why that has an effect on the dressing room, but like, I refuse to believe that is the sole reason we are here. And maybe it is, we've kind of been telling key players over the summer, as I think you alluded to on a previous pod, mate, that, there was maybe a conversation with you, Watkins, Martinez's, Morgans, where it's like, look, we want to keep you guys, but if we get a reasonable offer through the door, like everybody has their price type thing, and like that's what's upset the apple cart. I genuinely do not know. I struggle to imagine that the mood in the club was still so poor because we still got some like Kamara re-signing. Do you know what I mean? Like there was still like important pieces of business that we did within the last 12 months to keep players at the squad, at the club in the midst of kind of all this chaos. So like I just don't believe that the players are, losing track of Wilson Isidore or not tracking challenging Granit Xhaka, sorry, because of we sold Jacob Ramsey.
Yeah,
Do you know what I
it's
mean? Like,
it's
I
nonsense.
don't know. I don't know what is happening right now, but like something isn't right, and I'm really torn between maybe a breakaway from the league and a big European night at Villa Park is like exactly what we need, or I flip between the other end of the scale where it's like going into a European campaign right now could just be the worst thing for us possible because it's like we've already lost on two different fronts this season. We're already out of the cup. If we do go and put in a poor performance in Europe, then like I just don't know which way to kind of look on that one at the moment. And it's probably one to mull on, but yeah, there is something I look, and I don't think Unai is devoid of blame. I really, really don't. I don't love the teams that he is putting out. I don't love the business we done like this summer. Like it is still early. Elliot looks good. The jury, I think it's fair to say, the jury is really still out on Evan Gesson, considering he was the one outlay we made this summer in terms of the financials. Like to put 30 million, like 25, 30 million euro down on a player for us right now is a huge deal. And just not one that, like, we need players that can really come in and help this squad straight away. And I'm sure he will do that over time. But, it kind of goes back to the Daniel Marlin debate, mate, of like, the signings that we are making, which are so crucial and so important because we can't make many of them, just don't seem to be working. And if on the last pod, as we said, it is, Unai's giving the last approval on players, then the buck has to stop with him at some point if that is correct. If he is the one making the final judgment on these players and like they're coming in and not working, and Sancho and Elliot look good and like they can help, but neither is going to be in a position to put this team on their back at points this season. There's just a lot of question marks, mate. There's a lot of question marks kind of wherever you look. Nothing feels tied down. Nothing feels certain. As you said, like I think we're now at a point where there's some very, very important games coming up. And we've been quite lucky with the run that we've had to start the season. It's not been that difficult. We've not really played any top teams yet. And we're making pretty average teams in regards to the kind of Premier League table look pretty good right now. And all of a sudden, we're not going to have too many Fulhams and Burnleys coming up anymore. We're going to be going up against teams at the top of the table and playing like we are. It feels like a death wish at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm sure you watched Saturday Night Football last night, mate. I don't really fancy playing Fulham next in the league, to be honest. I thought
Yeah.
they're everything that we're not in terms of attacking wise. Just full throttle, like really took the game to Brentford and tore them apart. Um, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good, especially when you've got your Sunderlands, you've got your Burnleys, you've got your Leeds that are all looking pretty plucky. Like, I mean, there's no easy games in the Premier League anyway. We found that out last season. Well, we find it out every season, but when you can't beat Ipswich over two games, that was where we were at last season. So, we're already halfway there with like Sunderland, with Brentford to, a lesser extent, going to be a team that are probably going to be down there in the bottom five. I think they'll stay up, but based off what we've seen, they're not a great side. They're just, they're pretty plucky. But that's football, isn't it, mate? That's football. But I don't know. It's just like where do we go from here? Because Thursday night Bologna game's not sold out. First of all, that's when you look at in terms of like people getting behind the players, making Villa Park a fortress, it's not going to be that same atmosphere as it was in the Champions League, especially after recent results. It just isn't. And especially when you look at somebody like Morgan Rogers getting cheered off when he substituted. People cheered when Rogers came off, which I I don't feel any particular way when it comes to cheering and booing players, cheering, whether it's cheering sarcastically or booing players off. Um, that's just a personal thing. I don't say that to be all high and mighty. It just doesn't sit right with me. Um, but the frustration from the fan base is totally understandable and totally valid because it's another game where you're thinking, all right, who's this guy that's kidnapped Morgan Rogers and is playing in his place? Like this doppelganger is not. This isn't given, and it's another uncomfortable conversation that the fan base is already having, and I'm sure is something that's happening internally as well. Like, what do we do? Because so much of Aston Villa's attacking outlet relies on Morgan Rogers not only beating one man but beating two. Right? You look at the fact that, and this really has changed slowly when you look at like the sale of Diaby and Duran, and then obviously Bailey in the summer as well. But it coincides almost perfectly with the meteoric rise of Morgan Rogers, the pivot away, not necessarily like because it wasn't always that 4-2-2 with Diaby up front and Bailey playing off. But with Rogers' comeuppance isn't the right word, but with Morgan's rise, we did start to not rely on a Bailey or a Duran, obviously because we sold him at this point. When we're talking like peak Morgan. Um, Obviously, again, Diaby wasn't at the club. So much of what we do relies on the defenders giving Morgan the ball relatively deep, him beating one or two players, and that opening up that final third and dragging players out of position and giving Ollie the space to run into and giving JJ or whether it was Leon at the time or Ollie or whoever this space to go and attack. But you can't do that when you're double marked, or half the time he's not even double marked. He just isn't able to, or hasn't been able to go and beat his man, which leaves us in such a sticky situation. I don't know. Do you know? I think what sums Villa up perfectly is, and this like 60, 90 seconds, whatever it was, literally sums Villa up since about January. Is the Marlon? I'm not going to call it a chance miss because he didn't have a shot. But obviously that Ollie plays that ball through to Daniel. He's one on one, right? Daniel's one on one. His first touch is horrendous. It's a difficult one. I'm not going to downplay it because it's a really difficult touch to have because the touch needs to be heavy enough that he can drive away from the defender, but it can't be too heavy because obviously there's a goalkeeper that's barraging down him. The touch is a bit too heavy. It allows the centre half to make a really impressive recovery run, if we are being honest. That kind of unbalances Daniel. And I think this is why a penalty wasn't given. You have to, maybe you've got some more clarity, mate. You will have seen it on the telly. I've only seen it in real time. The goalkeeper he's coming for the ball. He sees Daniel sort of tumbling, and then he backs out, and Daniel ends up running into him.
Yeah.
Goalkeeper's sort of half pulled out. Daniel goes down. We've seen those be given as penalties. We have seen those being given as penalties. And I think if it wasn't for the fact that Daniel was obviously, or he's not like, it's not like he's like halfway down and like, it's not out of the realm of possibility that this is actually given as a penalty. But I do think that if that first touch is better, the goalkeeper either has to fully commit and then Daniel can either go round, chip over, take a shot, do whatever, or he gets taken out, right? In that sort of similar situation. But then the ball goes up to the other end, mate. And then obviously we go and concede a really soft goal with players ball watching. And, obviously we weren't necessarily tracking back. Like Daniel was on the floor. Ollie had kind of, I think he was just getting up as well because there was like a bit of a sort of a melee perhaps with his flick onto Daniel. And we concede. Does that not sum up Aston Villa?
Yeah, well, the Marlon thing for me was just like, that's a player who is out of form, is lacking minutes because you don't get that decisiveness, you don't get the confidence. Like you can see there's like, as you bang on as you pointed out, mate, there's like two or three things. He tries to do two or three things at once, like,
Yeah.
and ends up doing kind of none of them, and then just like ends up like, we were kind of running into the goal, like trying to like half trying to win a penalty. He doesn't really do that all too convincingly, to be honest. Like, and it's just like it is just kind of symptomatic of a player that like is just clinging on for minutes. There's a bit of desperation, like I want to do well when you do come on, and you get like that is good to a point, but when you kind of get past where that becomes a useful attribute, you kind of get to the point of desperation, and then you do things like, I'm not saying that like this like exact example, but yeah, when you're kind of overthinking things, you're trying to do too much, and yeah, I did when he kind of that happened. I was just like, that just, as you say, feels very symptomatic of where Villa are at the moment. The goal itself is just like so poor
Yeah.
because the euphoria of the Cash goal, like you look at how the players react and the guys off the bench running down to him, and it's like that is, you can see that the mood in the camp doesn't look too bad at that moment. Like you
Yeah.
kind of see all the guys get round him, and I say the substitutes running down to celebrate with him, like it's a great moment. And it's like, but all of a sudden, like the euphoria of that moment and what it clearly meant to the team is just like so carelessly wasted. It really is. And so, yeah, the kind of question of like, where do we go from here? Like, is banded about a lot. And like, I never really get what that question is exactly. Like,
Yeah.
into Bologna at home. That's all we can do. And like, there's such a body of work from this manager, from this playing staff, from the coaching team to know that I do not need to be worried right now.
There's undoubtedly
Like,
credit in the bank like that. I think that's
oh,
something that we should say.
so much so, so much
People
so.
all
Like,
refuse to acknowledge Unai Emery is going nowhere, and
uh,
nor do we want him to. There is, there's more than enough credit in the bank. He's
he
getting a
deserves
loan
the
from
chance.
any provider.
Exactly. He deserves the chance to turn this around. Like he is more than this is our first real, like, okay, maybe we had a bit of a slip at the back end of last season, but still, slipping into the Europa League is not a bad. That's not bad, really. To have a decent Champions League campaign and finish in the Europa League was more than par, I think, for last season. When you look at kind of Newcastle as a case study, who slipped down to like, was it ninth, 10th with Champions League football, which, to kind of we had a really, really good season. Okay, it ended with a bit of disappointment, but generally, I think if you just said to everybody last August, Champions League football, you're going to have a run to the quarterfinals as soon as you go out to the eventual winners very narrowly, and you're going to secure your Europa League and FA Cup semi-final to boot alongside. Every fan would have gone, that sounds like a bloody good season to me.
Yeah.
And it was, and it was. And so this is our first real slump under Unai, and he has earned the chance to turn this around. And I think he will. I think he will. From the body of work that we've seen, that's all that you can assume, right? Um, but it needs to change, and it needs to change quickly because Europe, you imagine, is gone already. Like, this is not something that I think is going to be turned around overnight. We're 5 games into the season. We're sat in the relegation zone. And I'm talking like, well, like we've seen Unai recover from December or whatever it was to recover a Conference League space. But like to seriously compete for the Europa and Champions Leagues is going to be a really big ask from this point. But it's doable, and we still have a huge chance to redeem ourselves in the Europa League itself, right? Like that is quickly becoming our best route into European football next season. And so they deserve the chance to turn around. I think they will turn it around. I don't think it's going to be an overnight process. But the fans, we need to see something change and quickly because I do think you're right, mate. I think I look at Thursday. I don't think it's going to be a great atmosphere. I think just because it's a team, like, even if it's not a huge side. It's a side we obviously played very recently in the Champions League, so it's kind of salt in the woods in that respect. Like, oh yeah, do you remember when you guys met like 12 months ago? Under the
Yeah.
Champions League music, yeah, lucky, yeah, unlucky. Is there's like that whole element to it and stuff like that, which is a bit of a downer. But um, yeah, I just think it's all very confusing, and I really kind of do. That's why I kind of come back to the question of like, where do we go from here? Like, what is the answer? Um, I can't even begin. Like when we've had poor Villa teams in the past, there's been, oh, it's because you have Steve Bruce is your manager, or like, oh, it's because you have Roberto Di Matteo and Tony Gio running the club, and then it's like, oh, you have this like completely toxic squad and like club atmosphere that got us relegated. Like, there's been like a clear, this is the problem.
Yeah.
We need to out the owner, the board, the playing staff, the manager. Like, you kind of you can pick out where the problem is, but with this, is it's like we have a great manager, we have a playing squad that okay, maybe it's a little bit stale, but has just run us to the Champions League quarterfinals, run PSG to the wire, got us to an FA Cup semi-final, and landed us in the Europa League. Like, it's the same group of players, um, and it's just like such a dichotomy of issues that it's so difficult to pick out the root cause. And that's why it's really difficult as fans to sit here and read between the lines. Those inside the club will know exactly what the problem is, and that's why, to kind of bring it full circle, that's why the manager's comments concern me, because I don't think there is a root cause to the problems. I don't think lumping all the blame on the players, and I don't think that's quite what Unai has done. But it's a move that we've seen managers pull so many times. It just never really ends well. I'm not too sure it's the truth. Okay, yes, there is something wrong with the players at the moment, but as I said, I don't think Unai is devoid of blame either. So it is just a web of kind of messy problems and confusion that doesn't really seem to have a root source at the moment, which is why as fans it's hard to kind of sit here and figure out, okay, this is when it's going to turn around.
But how much responsibility should be on the players here as well? Because to be fair, I think it's well documented from the fan base that people don't think the players are doing enough, and that data it shows in the stats, right? Um, I think I've got here 42% of ground duels won compared to 58% of Sunderland. They won 10 more duels. They were way more aggressive to like totally circle back to a point that you made earlier about just the lack of desire that Sunderland fought for every first ball, second ball, third ball. We don't have that. And again, it sounds like a broken record. We're too nice. We are too nice. They are too soft. And that has to change. Something has to change. And ultimately, that falls on the players. That does fall on the laps of the players, and that is their responsibility. But then, again, to the point that we made in the last podcast, mate, about this squad and who assembled it and who was signed in what era and all of that, it becomes increasingly more obvious as each game week passes that this squad has been completely wrung dry and has reached the end of its road, and we're still trying to make the 13-year-old dog roll over and give us his paw when he's just a vegetable. That's kind of where we're at, right? And it's no shade to anybody, because again, I don't need to repeat myself, but I will. I love this squad. I love these players. They have all given so much to get us to this point, but that is also the point. They have given everything.
Right, could I just mind if I ask you a quick question? Because like I don't disagree with your point at all, mate. But like the one thing I would kind of, the fact it's like this is not a gradual. Do you know what I mean? Like where you can see the players for like overnight in the space of one season to the next. Okay, maybe there's a bit of a carryover from last season, but like I still like I do agree. With totally like this team needs a refresh and it needs some new blood, and like desperately needed some like fresh injection this summer. But like there's still, this is still, it's a worse team, and that's what I want to cover. Like this team is not as good as like. Do you think Emery Buendia gets anywhere near the starting 11 last season when Asensio and Rashford are stuck knocking around? No way, no way. But like the fact that it's like such a sudden thing, it feels like in the space of a few months over the summer, like this team's just fallen off a cliff. That I don't know.
I hear it, mate. I hear it, but I just think like when you look at, I think Dean is like the perfect example of this, right? Dean has been like a 6.5, 7 out of 10 for the past 3-4 years, right? But he's just like he's lost that yard of pace. He's I don't want to say he's not as fit, but it's it like time
That's
mother time is
you d-
taking its
yeah.
toll,
Well,
right?
you got to look at a portion of blame has to go on Ian Matson there. Like the fact that he has still not claimed that spot from Luka Dean is pretty damning on him, isn't it?
It is, especially when you've spent so much money on him, and again, like I don't largely have many issues with the back line. Like I do think Dean's getting on a bit, but like, we're still playing Mings, and again, it's no shade at Mings, but he was signed in the Championship. Ezri Konsa, obviously, like England international, entering his prime years. Obviously a couple of years younger than Ty, so you've got that. Cash again, like somebody who I've sort of come fully round on. I think he's probably been our best player this season. And Emmy as well. Like, okay, he's not been at the levels, but it's Emmy. Like Booba. Booba's been one of our most reliable players. He looked bang average. Lamar Bogard comes on and
Yeah.
has totally outshone him in 20 minutes. John McGinn, same thing applies for Ty. Gesand, Buendia, Jurizan, Gesand, Rogers, where's he at? Ollie, I've not been able to criticise him up until this point because he's not had the service. He has to do better with that final header. That is all that I will say on Ollie Watkins. But I just think you need freshness. Look at City. They've had to totally reinvent. They've had to totally reinvent and sign all these players. And again, jury's still out on a lot of them. But like Pep Guardiola changes his style almost every season, and he's changed his entire backroom staff to reflect that this season. And I'm not saying that Unai should do the same or shouldn't. Either way, each to their own. But I just think that we've got the most out of a lot of these guys, and but I think Bogard is a really good example of this, right? Because what a player! I think he's going to be unbelievable. There were times last season where he played maybe a bit too much because he had to, because of the situation of the squad now. But we are now in a position where we are looking at Lamar Bogard to come on and influence games at his young age in the position that he's playing as well. It, the math isn't mathing, mate, as far as I'm concerned. And the bench is weaker. Like we spoke about Pau Torres last week. So there's no need to retread that, especially as we've got less than 2 minutes left on this Zoom, mate. But I just think that a change was needed, and I think it's important that I acknowledge that I was wrong because I was somebody in the summer that was, not championing, but I was, and I still am to a certain extent, sympathetic towards the situation that we sort of find ourselves in. But you can't not acknowledge that things needed a change. And yeah, we've got some new shiny toys, but maybe they're not as shiny as, the ones that kind of put us in the situation we're in that we signed in January. It doesn't have that same kind of shine.
Yeah, completely agree, mate. Very good point. And definitely one I can see a few people weighing in on. So I'd be interested to see what everyone else has got to say on that in the comments. But on to Bologna we go.
On to Bologna we go. Again, I'm not gonna torture you with a score prediction, mate, but I would love to. I'd a vibe check in the comments. Where is everybody's heads at? Yeah, I think it's just we need to get behind the lads on Thursday. That's really important. And before this Zoom ends, I have to tell you to subscribe, like, follow, share, download on Spotify, follow Apple. We're there as well. And up the Villa.